Hey everyone, this is Matt with the Fundamental Investing Institute. Thank you for tuning in today. Now, in the previous few videos, we talked about two measures of operating earnings that we hear a lot in the SMB acquisition space, and we talked about some of the flaws in them. Now, the first one was SDE, and that stands for Seller Discretionary Earnings. And that measure is very flawed because it does not take into account both the cost of the operating involvement from the owner, the buyer, and it does not take into account capital expenditures. That is the tangible investments that need to be made to replace or buy fixed assets. The other measure was EBITDA, which stands for earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization. And that measure, if properly calculated, does take into account the cost of the owner's operating involvement, but it does not take into account the expenditures for the fixed assets, or what we call capital expenditures. Now, what is CapEx? CapEx are the expenditures necessary to either replace current assets or by current assets, I don't mean that in an accounting sense. I mean that only in terms of what the business currently owns. These are fixed assets. So, for example, if we have a delivery truck and we need to replace a new one, we call that replacement CapEx or maintenance CapEx. And then we have another measure that is growth CapEx, and that is any additional fixed assets that we purchase. So, CapEx in general are these expenditures for fixed assets. They do not show up on the P&L. They're expensed on the P&L through depreciation. So as a cash flow measure, because depreciation is non-cash, we generally add that back. So how do we like to define cash flow? And my advice is to always think like a banker and think like a creditor. So anyone who is lending money for the acquisition is going to be focused on the discretionary cash flow that is needed in order to service debt. So they're going to take into account a lot of these different shortcomings of these other measures. So the measure that we think works best for this is what we call normalized free cash flow. I'm just going to touch on that here. We'll talk about it more in subsequent videos, but normalized free cash flow is really the best measure for the long-term discretionary cash flow that the business is going to generate. And it's the best measure for covering debt service and also making any payments to equity holders. So it captures the real economic value of the business. We'll stop that here. Thank you for tuning in. We'll talk more next time. Thank you.